How do you feel about substances that can be used to completely control other people's feelings and actions? The heroes of our movie agreed to the experiments for the sake of mitigating the conditions of their imprisonment. But what happened in this movie shocked everyone and made them think about many things. What happened to our heroes after they consented to experiments on them? It's movie recap zone and a new retelling you will learn in today's retelling. Enjoy the movie. The childhood of the movie takes place in a scientific prison called Spiderhead, in which prisoners voluntarily agree to experiments with various substances. In return, they get mitigation of their prison terms. Each inmate has a Moby pack attached to his back, which is a container of liquids on his back that can be controlled by Dr. Steve's phone. The substance is injected directly into his spinal cord and works instantly. The prisoner Ray gives his consent to start the experiment with the administration of the first substance, G46. After the substance is injected, the prisoner is told some unfunny jokes, but Ray can't stop laughing. After they start reading him any facts, he keeps laughing. Steve is a scientist doctor who works in this prison and conducts his experiments on the prisoners. Mark helps Steve with his experiments. At the end of the experiment, Ray is released. Every day, Steve flies to the alienated island on his plane. This prison is more like a bunker which is far away from civilization. Our main character, Jeff, is on good terms with the doctor, as the prisoner most often agrees to the experiments, so he has his privileges. In the morning, Jeff is invited to come into the doctor's office. After that, they go to nature for another experiment. We see him being injected with N40. The prisoner is thrilled to see some very beautiful nature. In fact, the guy is looking at a factory that is polluting the environment. Steve is pleased with how N40 works. After completing the experiment, Jeff goes back to his room where Lisi, who the guy likes, is waiting for him. She has made dinner and asks how the experiment went. In the morning, Ray comes to Steve's room again for the experiment. This time, he is joined by the prisoner Heather. They begin the experiment. It turns out the couple are complete strangers and have no feelings for each other, as Jeff has a favorite girlfriend, Lisi. After the introduction of the substance N40, they are in love, and the couple feels a strong attraction to each other. They have sharply increased arousal. They are injected with a second drug, with the help of which a person tells the truth. They begin to tell what more and more like each other. They can't help themselves and begin to get to know each other more and more. They undress and begin to do it knowing that they are being watched. They're not embarrassed at all and can't stop. They enjoy themselves completely. They confess their love for each other. When they stop injecting the substance, the infatuation goes away immediately. Jeff, along with Lizzie, prepare dinner for the other inmates and go out to serve. Jeff meets Heather, but they don't say anything to each other. At the next experiment, Steve invites Sarah, who is much older than Heather. She doesn't excite the guy at all. But after the substance is injected, things change dramatically and Jeff makes love to her. It's time for Jeff to replenish the Moby pack, which Mark does. They talk about life and Jeff asks to be transferred to another place. Mark agrees to help him. Heather and Sarah are invited to the next experiment. Jeff is invited to the doctor's office to observe the experiment. He is given the opportunity to control the experiment with his phone. Steve shows how to administer the fear substance, but the guy doesn't want to do it, since Jeff doesn't feel anything for them. He can't make a choice, and Steve says they won't be administering a fear substance called Darkenflox today, but he wants to see how the love substance N40 works in this situation. The doctor tells him that this substance will make the world a better place and everyone will be able to love. Afterwards, Jeff sees where the doctor hides his notes. Lizzie brings snacks for the prisoners and treats Jeff. The prisoner is encouraged to use the phone. He calls his wife, who was in an accident caused by him. Afterwards, Jeff goes into Lizzie's room and tries to cheer her up. At the next experiment, Jeff is invited to another prisoner, Rogan, and Jeff does not want to continue the past experiments. Turns out they weren't planning to inject N40. They just sat around and parted ways. Coming to Steve, the guy realizes that Heather was making the same choices as Jeff. The girl confirms this and the doctor asks her to cover her mouth. As the substance is affecting the girl, she takes off her sock to do so, but the doctor stops her and they say goodbye. The doctor tells her that it is not his wish to abuse the prisoners, but that all orders come from his superiors, reminding Jeff that he has privilege among the other inmates of the prison from which he was taken. The doctor convinces Jeff that everything in this prison is built on mutual respect, and the prisoner calms down. Steve convinces him not to violate the agreement on experiments and everything will be fine, to which Jeff agrees. The doctor says goodbye to Mark before the weekend and tells his assistant that the fear substance will be tested in just 1 week, so don't be dissatisfied. After seeing Mark off, the doctor goes to have some fun. Jeff tells Lizzie how he felt when he injected the substance. Lizzie asks the guy why he refuses to work in the kitchen. Jeff says it's because of the new substances they're testing on him. It's hard for him to be here, but when the girl is around, he feels better. The doctor trains with Mark to box, and at the training session, they share their ideas, saying that Mark is too small-minded and asks him to refill his box with substances. The assistant asks him not to take any unnecessary risks to avoid becoming addicted to the substances, to which the doctor replies that he needs to test it on himself. Testing the substances in new experiments, it turns out that many prisoners have gone to the other world. Jeff enters the doctor's office and sees that Steve also has a box. The doctor is unhappy that the prisoner found out about it, and after hiding the drugs in his desk, they set off for the next experiment. He tells them that he's going to drive Heather's fear substance, as it's required by the committee and the doctor is obliged to do so. After making sure all the substances are connected, they begin the experiment. Jeff doesn't want Heather to drive the fear substance. The doctor decides to go tricky on the prisoner, reminding Jeff that the doctor has helped him all the time and remembers all his birthdays. This is because they are friends and help each other out. Jeff asks to call the doctor to the committee to talk to them. Here we realize that Steve doesn't want to do that, but agreeing, he leaves. Leaving the office, he meets Lizzie in the kitchen. They begin to discuss how the girl feels about being in this institution. The doctor rubs into her confidence, but reminisces that he has given her gifts before. Back in the office, Steve lies that the committee insists on continuing the experiment. If he doesn't comply, Jeff will be sent back to a regular prison, and his sentence will be increased. The guy agrees, and the experiment begins. She is administered a fear substance. The girl starts to panic and becomes terribly afraid. At this time, Jeff is injected with truth serum, and he tells about his feelings and thoughts while he is watching. Out of fear, the girl starts to hit the wall behind her back and damages the box. All the substances start to enter her spinal cord, and there is complete chaos. The doctor, together with Mark, can't do anything. And Mark can't do anything because they can't control it remotely. She grabs a chair shard and hurts herself. There is nothing they can do. When Steve was running to Mark's aid, he dropped his keys, and Jeff notices. After opening the desk studying the paperwork, the guy realizes that this is Dr. Steve's company and there is no management. He found some records with numbers where there are only 2 left, under the numbers 40 and 6. He realized that all the other drugs are tested, and the main focus is on these 2. Dr. Steve decides to go back to the office. Jeff manages to put everything back in place and close the desk. When Steve runs into the office, he sees Jeff sitting and the keys on the floor. Figuring the prisoner was just sitting there watching, the doctor didn't suspect a thing. At night, the doctor and Mark clean up the tracks. Steve convinces the assistant that no one must know about this as the prison could be closed. Mark doesn't like this but agrees to keep quiet. The doctor calms the assistant down and sends him to rest. The doctor reveals that Heather didn't survive and that this happens in experiments, trying to explain to Jeff that they are making the world a better place. It's better to keep quiet about the situation so that all efforts are not in vain. To take his mind off the situation, the doctor suggests that Jeff relax and try new supplements. Their mood improves too, even when telling the saddest stories, they laugh. After lowering the dose, Steve tells Jeff that they are sitting there like best friends. The prisoner replies that he can't leave anytime he wants, as the doctor can. But Steve says he can't leave anytime he wants either, because he has fallen in love with his job and the doctor has nothing else. In the morning, Steve and Mark continue their experiments and are testing a phobia-inducing drug. Lizzie is terrified of the common stapler, so they finish the experiment. Afterward, they discuss with Jeff how she felt in that room. They discuss why they are here and how this prison is different from the last one. Is it worth it to agree to such experiments for the sake of going out into the corridor and copper cooking pots? Lizzie asks the guy why he's here. Jeff says he can't forgive you for driving drunk. That's why his loved ones died. The night after the party, the 3 of them hit the road. Jeff lost control of the car and crashed into a tree. His friend went forward and hurt his neck, and his wife couldn't get out of the burning car. Lizzie says they made the decision to get in the car, and after kissing death, they went into the bedroom. After everything happened, they went to the kitchen to eat. Steve walks up to them, and before they leave, he realizes they are in love. He watches Jeff and sees a drawing of Lizzie, On his desk, the doctor injects himself with another dose of N40 and comes up with a plan for his next experiment. Jeff is supposed to inject Lacey with the fear serum. He refuses and yells at Steve for the first time. The doctor calms him down, suggesting he continue the next day and think things over at night. When Jeff starts to leave, the doctor presses the guy's feelings and lets him go. Later, Mark visits Jeff to refill his medication. The prisoner closes the door to talk and convinces Mark to tell the truth. The prisoner tells him that he saw Steve's files and realized that he is the boss, appealing to Mark's humanity. The scientist tells him that he is working with Steve because the doctor promised to change the world for the better, but things have changed over time. They have a plan and decide to carry it out in the morning. Jeff comes to Steve's for an experiment. Turns out Mark is sick and taking the day off. The experiment begins. Steve says this is the last dose of the fear substance to be administered to Lizzie. Taking the phone, Jeff heads over to the girl. He still refuses to inject the substance and Steve is angry. The doctor decides to tell why Lizzie went to prison. The girl then tells him to start the experiment and that Jeff won't hurt her so he can proceed. He decides to inject the drug, but changes the settings on his phone and injects the fear substance into Steve. Steve realizes what's going on and tries to take the phone back, but is afraid to do so. It turns out that Mark has changed the substances in Steve's container, adding a drug numbered B6, with the help of which the man follows all orders. He confirms his assumption that all the drugs that were administered don't really matter. The only drug that matters is B6, which controls a person's will. Jeff takes this drug to the doctor to find out the truth, why this substance was not marked with an asterisk. Steve gives all the details. Turns out the main experiment was to see if Jeff could hurt the ones he loved, even if he didn't want to. The doctor's dream was to make a whole planet of obedient humans to act for the greater good, as they were told. Steve doesn't want to admit what's really going on in prison, because the doctor could have everything taken away and arrested. Steve reveals that Jeff was released 7 months ago and Lizzie 1 week ago, but the doctor won't admit it. Jeff forces the main gate open and lets Lizzie out. After the prisoner turns away, Steve pulls out a knife. Jeff orders him to hand over the knife, but the doctor won't listen. Turns out the B6 drug has one thing going for it. A person can't hurt what they love. So the drug stopped working. Steve takes the phone from the prisoner and injects Lizzie 4 capsules of the substance, with fear after that they smash the phone. Jeff lunges at the doctor and damages his container. While the men are fighting, Jeff sees that Lizzie has hurt herself and runs to her to help her. Jeff saves the girl and removes all the drugs from her container, then confesses his love. As the phone is broken, he starts to administer the drugs to Steve in a chaotic order. But the doctor manages to get to the microphone and orders all the inmates to stop Jeff and Lacey, as they will return with the police and the comfort of all the inmates will be jeopardized. All the inmates decide to listen to the order. First, they disarm Sarah, after which they meet Ray and gun him down. At the same time, Steve tries to fly away from the police, taking his work with him. The prisoners chase the couple, but Jeff and Lizzie manage to escape. They watch Steve fly away and realize that something is wrong. It turns out that the drugs are delivered to Steve in a chaotic order. Over the sea, he sees the police are close by and suddenly decides to fly into the mountains. He sees a spectacular sunset and crashes into the rocks. Jeff and Lizzie manage to get away on a boat. They're glad it's over and head off to a new life. It was a movie from 2022 called Spiderhead. Write in the comments, should you agree to such experiments or not? Maybe similar substances are already used in real life, but few people know who and where they are being used. See you in the next retellings.